When you're chasing sounds in a mix, it can be really easy to overcomplicate the process. You add plugin after plugin, you keep tweaking, and you hope that by adding more, it's gonna finally make your mix sound better. But the truth is that the more you stack on, the more confusing and overwhelming things often get. And it often slows you down too. So that's exactly why I built my new plugin company, Carb Audio. We focus on building plugins that replace long, complicated signal chains with simple, results-driven tools. We've got the Smashburger compressor, which gives you punch, glue, character, and transient control all in one place. So instead of having to stack multiple compressors or extra processors, you can just dial it all in one plugin and move on. We also have Busboy, which combines filtering, broad musical EQ, classic bus compression, and limiting all into one streamlined mix bus tool. And then we have Slapshot, which lets you add space and width to a mix, but without having to build complicated signal chains that are used to clean up the muddiness and harshness that typical reverbs and delays would add. Each Carb Audio plugin is designed to remove steps, remove clutter, and help you get results faster. Now you can grab them all individually, or get everything with the all-in bundle, which gives you all of them together at the best possible price. And if you already own any of our plugins, just log into your account, add the bundle to your cart, and you'll see your own personal upgrade discount automatically applied. We even have a free 14-day trial of all of our plugins if you want to try them first. So if you're ready to simplify your workflow and get better sounds in less time, make sure to grab the Carb Audio all-in bundle at carbaudio.com. Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thanks for hanging out today. Today, my guest is Brian Rajaratnam, and if you're not familiar with him, Brian is an amazing engineer who has worked on a lot of different styles of music. He's worked with artists like Miley Cyrus. He helped work on her Flowers track, which we get into in this episode. He's worked with artists like Slipknot, Avenged Sevenfold. He's even worked on the Toy Story 4 soundtrack. So his abilities span multiple genres. But in this interview, we get into the art of engineering. Like, Brian is an engineer. That is his main focus. He's not really getting into the mixing side of things too much. He's mainly engineering. And he's working under some amazing producers. And in this interview, we dive deep into what that truly entails as an engineer, how to be a really good engineer, and to be able to be flexible enough that you can work with lots of different producers, lots of different genres of music, and be able to still turn out really good results. And in this episode, Brian talks a lot about the ways that he creates efficiencies as far as the way he sets up his sessions or the way he sets up his I/O and just has things ready to go at his studio. Even as far as like just having specific mics that he goes to wherever he's working out of, right? Like he has certain things that allow him to make decisions fast so that he can just keep the momentum of a session going and, get results fast, and the artist is happy, everyone's stoked about their songs. And yeah, so in this interview, we definitely break down that process. He even walks us through what his sessions look like when he's tracking vocals and how he organizes things so that he can track really fast as well. So we get into all of that stuff. We also dive into his process for recording bass and getting really solid bass tones. One record that he worked on that has incredible sounding bass is the Kings of Leon record called Can We Please Have Fun? And with that record, the bass plays such a major role in their songs. So you have to get it right if you're going to be recording Kings of Leon, right? So yeah, we dig into that. And we even get into Brian's journey about getting into audio engineering and how that even included studying pre-med and then making a transition into audio engineering and what that involved and his mindset making that shift. And I think that that's important because I think there's a lot of people listening to this who struggle with the idea of whether or not audio is the path to go forward with when there are a lot of other like traditional jobs that maybe pay better or, have cozy benefits, blah, blah, blah. But in this interview, we talk about that transition that Brian made. And I think that it can certainly apply to you as well if you're in that boat. So with that said, let's just jump right into this one. Brian Rajaratnam, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How's it going today, man?
Good. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Of course. For people who might not be familiar with you and who you are, what you do, and some of the projects you worked on or how you got into this stuff, can you give us that background?
Yeah, so I'm mainly a tracking and recording engineer. I've been in the business for about, I guess now would be 9 years. So quite a while. Time flies. But yeah, I started out working at a studio just as like a runner and an assistant. And then I kind of worked my way up and got some projects there and then hooked up with a few producers and then started doing some records. I feel like that's how it normally goes, or that's how you want it to go. And that's how it went.
Nice. Was the goal to always just be like a tracking person, or did you think you were going to be like a mixing engineer or something bigger?
No, so I mean, I still do some mixing on the side, and I would like to do that eventually, I think full time. But the tracking stuff is just so much fun right now. It's just fun to work with different artists, and then you also get different workflows, and it does help your mixing in the end. Because at the end of the day, like when I do like writing sessions with artists, it's like a 10-hour, 12-hour day of writing, and then I edit that same day, and then I also do like a rough mix after the fact. So all that like condensed into one day kind of makes you better. Like, okay, what is the goal here? How do I make this like sellable? Because, they go home, they relax, they have dinner or whatever, and then you send them a rough mix, and then you want them to be like, oh, this is better than I remember. So I kind of all like folded into each other. So I feel like the tracking side of things is super helpful, just getting to that next level or getting to the next goal.
For sure. And I imagine too that like by being the tracking engineer, working with a lot of producers who maybe also do the mixing side of things too, like you're learning the importance of the arrangement and like the layering and stuff like that goes into what ultimately will make a great mix, and instead of just like hitting record and hoping for the best.
100%. Yeah. And also it just kind of goes to like, you also learn about like how nothing, this is going to sound weird, how nothing really matters. Like,
I love that though. That's important.
Like nothing really matters, and nothing is like set in stone. Like people have 100 different ways of doing stuff, and they all can be correct, and nothing is necessarily wrong. And then at the end of the day, you could work on a song for like 12 hours, and then sometimes it changes, like it matters in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, like everything is flux and it's kind of open, which kind of I like. Kind of maybe seems daunting, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like that is because people maybe coming into sessions that like don't have like a clear vision for like what the end product should be, or is it just maybe just because of this kind of sessions you're working on where it's like writing sessions and people are like literally in the moment creating something from scratch?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, especially with the writing sessions, because I mean, I'm sure how they go is like there's no idea. Like the session starts off with basically like a therapy session and like everyone's talking about their day. It's like, oh, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your life? Oh, that's a cool idea. Let's write a song about that. And then like 2 hours later, there's like a song being written about whatever you just talked about 2 hours earlier. But yeah, I think even when we do full like albums, and I've worked with albums, like everything is still kind of flux, because like at the beginning of the project, you see it going one way and you want it to go one way, but then like naturally and organically, it just evolves into something else that you didn't realize. And that's why a lot of artists end up cutting out a lot of their earlier songs for final album releases. And they're like, well, it just didn't fit where we ended up, wasn't where we started. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think too, it's like sometimes, yeah, they're in the middle of a session, there becomes this, like someone suggests a new idea and you're like, oh shit, that's really cool. Like we should have done that on the previous songs. And exactly. Just like, you're playing catch up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's always evolving. And it's kind of the same with like engineering or mixing. It's always evolving and changing depending on, I guess, your mood.
For sure, of course. Yeah, and I'm sure every day is totally different. You can record the same artist 2 days in a row, and yeah, the next day, like the vibe could be different, and like that drastically changes the performances you're going to get, that kind of thing. Yeah. So let's take a step back. Like, how did you ultimately get into music production in the first place? Like, what got you there?
Well, so it's kind of a long story, so bear with me. So when I graduated college, or right before, or when I was applying to colleges, I loved music in high school. Like I was in like band. I was like a band geek, right? I played saxophone. But in my mind, the only feasible like career path in music was to become a music teacher, which I love all the music teachers, but that's not something I wanted to do. And then all the music teachers were like pushing for, oh yeah, go to this teaching school. I was like, nah. So I went and applied to pre-med programs and I got in. And so for 2 years, I was like a pre-med student at NYU. And then after 2 years, I was like, I'm not really... Like I feel like I'm going through the motions. So I dropped out, took some time off, and then my roommate at the time sent me this like free online course for music production because he knew I love music and like I would just like do really bad songs in my free time and show it to him and be like, cool. And so he sent me this free online course, and it's through Berklee College of Music. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. It's for like an electronic music production thing. And I was like, maybe I should just like try to apply to the school and like do this, because I researched it and I found out they had a really amazing engineering program. And up until that point, I had no idea about engineering. Like the most I engineered was doing like live sound for my high school plays and musicals, which looking back, I'm sure I did a horrible job. But so I applied, I got in, and then I got into the MP&E program. And then from there, I moved out to LA in 2017, started working at a studio. And then 3 years later, like during the pandemic, I had another like semi-quarter life crisis, I guess it would be. Like, what am I doing? The studio life, it's like wearing on me. I was like, I need to make my next move. And so then I got hooked up with the producer and then started doing like records full time. And then, that's where I am now.
That's amazing. I want to go back to the pre-med stuff because I feel like that's actually like a really interesting direction to start from. And I think that like, I know that there's a lot of people listening to this who often feel pressure to be in a career outside of music, whether that's like from family or their partners or teachers or whatever. First off, did you ever feel that pressure growing up that like music isn't really the career that you should be in?
No, not at all. No, my family's super supportive. In fact, they actually didn't want me to do medicine. They wanted me to do business. And I was like, no, I want to be a doctor. But no, I never felt any pressure to do anything specific. And they always encouraged my music. They like would drive me everywhere, like piano lessons, violin lessons, sax lessons, go to all my shows, go to all my things, do my own recitals. So it never was like, and they were like, oh my God, you're good. Like, not to brag. They're like, oh, you're a talented guy. Like, you should definitely pursue this, or like definitely like don't stop. And even when I went to college, they're like, do you want to take your keyboard with you so you don't stop playing? And I was like, there's no room in my dorm right now, but I'll get it eventually. So I was lucky where they were super supportive. And then even when I transitioned to audio engineering, because they still don't quite know what it is, like explaining it to their friends.
I'm the same way. If I ask my parents, they're like, he plays drums. Like,
because I think in their mind, because they're from Sri Lanka and I'm like a first generation American. So all their friends are, immigrants and stuff. And so when they think about engineering, they think about like an engineer, like designing gear, electronic engineering or structural engineering. So when I say audio engineering, they get a little bit confused. They're like, oh, so you just like record and make albums. I was like, yeah. And they're like still processing in their mind. They're like, okay, yeah.
The word engineering is a bit of a weird one, I think. Like, it throws some people off for sure. And there's certainly like, I sometimes think that it's like the equivalent of like drummers calling their seat a throne. Like it's just like making us sound smarter than we are or bigger than we are. But then there are people who certainly are like very much engineer mindset and like, building things and whatever. Like, I get that.
100%. I mean, it did stem from that. Like back in the day, like you had to have, like the engineers literally wore like, like lab coats back at RCA while recording stuff. So I think if we just rocked up wearing lab coats, everyone would be like, oh, it makes more sense.
Yeah. I think that's why you see like the certain engineers will dress up a little bit more, like get the suits on, and it's still that tradition that's moving forward with it. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's super cool that you had a super supportive family. Did you ever feel like when you made that transition from the med school to music, like was there ever any like the med stuff is still plan B or something like that? Or was it very much like, I'm destined to do this, I know I can, like I'm just dropping everything, I'm all in?
Yeah, I think there was still like a plan B in the back of my, because when, like I said, like going into it, I knew nothing about engineering or music production. So I was like, I'm just going to try this out to start something. And then, it was just something that I organically fell in love with and like just latched onto. And then I was like, no, this is what I want to do. Like, I couldn't imagine doing anything else but this. Like, it's just like, even like, everyone has those days where like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like when you're editing something for like 6 hours straight and you're like, I'm staring at the screen and nothing's getting better. But then there are other days where it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. How lucky am I to be like doing this? So there was a plan B in the beginning, and now it's just like, no, I'm in this. I enjoy it thoroughly. I love it. I'm super lucky that I get to do what I do.
If you're a fan of the Master Your Mix podcast, you might not even know yet that we actually have a full website packed with a ton of resources designed to help you make better mixes. So head on over to masteryourmix.com, and on there you're going to find free downloads, cheat sheets, blog articles, books, courses, and a whole bunch more, all designed to help simplify your mixing process, give you more clarity, and help you finish more music without second guessing every move. And then if you're looking for more personalized one-on-one help where I can work directly with you on your tracks and walk you through the recording, editing, and mixing processes step by step, that's exactly what I work on inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And you can learn more about that at masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can book a free call with me where we can talk through your current process, figure out where your gaps are, and identify the fastest ways to help you move forward with your tracks. And then if it makes sense to work together beyond that call, we can absolutely talk about that too. So once again, that's masteryourmix.com. And then for coaching, masteryourmix.com/amplitude. I love that. I love that. But it also seems too, like looking at your career, it looks like from very early on, you've also been very open-minded to the types of projects that you would take on too. Like you weren't the type of person that was like, I'm niching down to this style of music and like this, this skill or whatever. You've taken on a lot of different things. You've worked on rock, pop, metal, even the Toy Story soundtrack, which is awesome. So I'm curious to know, like, how important is having diversity in the projects that you work on to you and to your career?
But to me, 100%. Like, I think that just makes you like a better person and a better engineer overall. Cause like working with a bunch of different producers that do different genres, working with a bunch of different engineers that do different genres, you see all the different workflows. Like the pop workflow is not the rock workflow, which is not the classical or jazz workflow. And like those all like add up all into each other, I think. Cause it just like makes you appreciate A, the art, B, the skill, and then C, the music. Like growing up, like I never like had a genre of music that I listened to, and I still don't. Like I will listen to anything and everything, and I feel like the same should apply for your work. Like you don't need to be pigeonholed, or you don't need to focus on one thing. But you can if you want. If you just love rock music, then just go for it.
Yeah. From your experience of like seeing, friends in the industry, like do you feel like there is an advantage to having that diversity versus niching, or is it better to maybe niche?
I think there's pros and cons for both. The good part about the diversity is that you could then at some point, do anything. If someone's like, hey, like, for example, like I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago and the project was like an orchestra. And it was like we're doing like orchestral arrangements of like pop songs. So I was like, okay, so now I need to do like a string recording session, like with 12 players, and like get that sounding good in this room that I've never been to. And like, so if I hadn't done like a few string sessions before, like TV or stuff, like I would, yes, you could look it up and like figure it out. But like having the previous knowledge, like I was just able to get in there and be like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how we could do it. And like, it just worked better. So I feel like that in all scenarios, like the last thing you want to do is go into a situation and be the person that like hangs everything up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to like be the person the band is waiting on, be the person the artist is waiting on, because I'm trying to figure out like, oh, you know what? This might sound cool. Although, there is room for experimentation and stuff. Like you don't want to be too lackadaisical about all that stuff. You don't want to be like, give me 2 hours to figure out this drum sound, or 2 hours to get like these strings sounding really good, especially when there's like strings involved. They're all like union and there's like breaks and stuff. So I feel like the experience just lends itself. And, there's also like cross-pollination. Like you can use some techniques like for string recording, or like to capture a really good room sound for drums, or like, do some weird stuff, or even so like do some weird miking techniques that you would do with the rock band with strings. Like it could go either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it also goes back to like before we hit record, we were talking about like confidence in engineers and how we all still kind of like are our worst critics, and we're always like, challenging ourselves to push ourselves and learn more. And so I think that in those moments where maybe you're trying something that's new and scary, like that's just another opportunity to become a better engineer, and like just try. Like you might fuck up, but whatever, you end up learning something from it, and then you're that much more prepared for the next session that comes around, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was talking to like an assistant of a producer I used to work with, and he was like, yeah, man, I mean, like, I'm just like, it's been such a pleasure, like watching you work and working with you. You're just like so confident in what you're doing. I was like, oh, I'm glad I was putting that off, because internally I was like, what am I doing? Like, I was like, oh man, I gotta be like on it all the time. Like, he's like, you're so calm and collected. And so, yeah, so that confidence goes like both ways. Like you could exude like a calmness, and that comes off as confident, while internally you're like, oh man, this could either go really good or really bad.
For sure. Yeah. I think that like I was literally doing a university lecture for a school yesterday, and someone had asked me about confidence as well. And, it's like, they're asking like, well, how do you gain confidence or know like when you're confident? And I'm like, you're never fully confident. Like you have this, like, it's like an illusion that you know what you're doing, but like you're just trying things and hoping for the best and trying to keep your composure and like don't have a meltdown when it doesn't work out the way you want,
Exactly. Because I mean, like, you go into different studios and everything is always different. Sometimes things don't work. Sometimes things you planned on having aren't there. And you're like, okay, well, now I have to pivot. I think the confidence comes in the ability to like quickly switch and make a decision and just commit to that. Be like, okay, well, we can't do this anymore. So to get things going and get things moving, like, we need to do this and adapt.
For sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask about some of the producers that you've had a chance to work with. Like you worked with people like Kid Harpoon and Joe Ciccarelli and a lot of great engineers, great producers. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from working with people like those guys?
That like everything you think you know, you don't know. Like if you think there's a certain way to do something, you think that's the only way to do something, I promise you it's not. My mind is like very linear in things, like A to B to C. And sometimes working with producers and like hyper creative people, they go from like A to D to B to C to E back to A. And like what you would do linearly, it like goes in a loop, but it's a really interesting loop that you need to go to get to where you are going, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's just like different workflows are awesome to see. And then just like all the rules you thought you learned don't really matter. Nothing, do whatever you want. It's going to sound, if it sounds great, that's all that matters. Like no one's going to be like, you can't put a 57 there. Oh, you put a D12 on a snare drum. Like, who cares? If it sounds good, it sounds good. And that's like, like I always go back to like the Glenn Johns technique, right? Like you move a mic to record an acoustic guitar and then you forget to put it back. And then everyone's like, whoa, that drum sound is awesome. And then people are like, oh yeah, he just forgot though to do that one thing. Like, and now it's like a thing, things happen organically and they yield amazing results. So you don't have to set up, a spaced pair overhead all the time, or you don't have to record your drums in stereo,
Yeah, there's a lot of happy accidents that can happen, and you just have to be open-minded to that happening.
Yeah. And then I think that's the one thing that I learned most, like working with a bunch of different producers, is that they just all experiment in their own ways. And it's cool to watch them do their thing and like how their mind works.
Interesting. So as an engineer, like I do think that is fascinating that you're getting to experience someone else's workflow. Like someone else's workflow is dictating the way the session is going to run for the most part. And to them, it's probably like the way that they just always work. They have their system, even if it seems random to you, it's probably very like intentional to them. As an engineer, like learning to develop that skill of being flexible, I guess, has to be like an interesting part of that process. Like, you probably have your way of like, you would naturally feel inclined to do something, but when someone else is like bouncing around, like what, maybe you can give us a little background on like that flexibility and how you manage that and navigate that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the flexibility is definitely important, especially now that I've been in like the pop world for a minute and doing all these like writing sessions and like full on sessions and stuff. Flexibility and like just being on it and anticipating the next move is super important. So for these like the past 2 years, like I've upped like my IO to like 96 in, 96 out, which is like insane. That's a lot. I know. But there's like hardware inserts, there's 2 drum kits, there's like guitars, vocals, another vocal chain, and everything is in track punch all the time. So when we're doing sessions, like, because I find that like people are always just like bopping around and being like doing one part on like a Model D and then hopping to a Mellotron and being like, oh, I want to put this in while someone else is laying down like vocals and stuff. So I feel like being over prepared and just having everything ready to go. And that way, no one has to wait for anything. No one has to be like, oh, we want to get this drums. We want to get this amp up. I'm like, oh, no, it's ready to go. Top on, do your thing. And like just facilitating any process necessary. And then that way, in my mind, I also know that it already sounds good because I set it up. And then, B, they're happy because they don't have to wait for me to set anything up.
Yeah, I love that. How long would you say, like, in a typical writing session, like how long would you say it takes to make these songs from beginning to end?
Depends. I mean, quickly, like the quickest I've probably seen is like someone, and these are like pro top liners, like, and writers and stuff, like knock it out in like 2 hours. And then they're like, then we get 3 songs in one day, which is amazing. And then, yeah, and then it just goes on from there. But sometimes, it depends. They get stuck in like, they get half a song in one day. It depends.
Yeah. No, I just asked that because I think it really does emphasize like what you're talking about here, just like anticipating the next move and like being ready to like capture that creativity in the moment and like working fast. Because there's so many people that I know that are listening to this that are like literally sitting on recordings that they started like 10 years ago and they've never put it out because they're still like critiquing and all that kind of stuff, right? So it is kind of interesting to see that like when you set yourself up in an environment where you can work faster, like things can get done. You just have to be ready for it and just be open to it all. Which kind of leads me to like another question that I wanted to ask you. Like, I know one song that was really pivotal in your career was the Miley Cyrus Flower song. And from my understanding with that track, it went through a lot of different versions to get to the version that we know today, right? Can you maybe shed some light on like the making of that song and maybe some of the revision process behind it?
Yeah, so that song was already written before we got it. Like, and I was engineering, and then it was Kid Harpoon and Tyler Johnson producing. And so we were already doing some other songs for Miley. And at the end of the night, one night, she's like, oh, hey, I want to look back at that Flower song. And then she's like, I did it live with my band in some regard. And like, I want this like Parisian underground, like red light bar kind of vibe. And so again, with just being prepared with everything, like, Tom hopped on bass, Tyler hopped on keys, and Miley was singing. And like, it was like this 6-minute, like very slow, jazzy rendition of Flowers. Anyway, that's where it started. But then it just kept getting tweaked over time, and it went to the more poppy version, and then it strayed away to a different version, and then it came back to the poppy version and strayed away again, and then came back. So it always just like came back. And that's like what we were talking about before, like, you think you have an idea in the beginning and then it just organically goes one way. And then in this case, it organically like went and then came back. It ebbed and flowed into the final version. I mean, yeah, there were so many versions, but at the end, it was just so many different little tweaks that kind of made it. It was like, oh, this should have like roads on it, or, oh, not the roads there. You know what I mean? But yeah, that was a fun process. Yeah.
It's very cool. And good to hear about like that flexibility with the song itself, right? And again, going back to what I was talking about earlier with people who are stuck working on songs that they've started forever ago. Like, I feel like there are a lot of people that get demo-itis with their songs, or they're too close to it, and like they almost have trouble like taking that big picture approach to their music and trying to like have an open mind to revising their music as well. So I'm curious to know, like, what advice do you have for people in that kind of situation as far as like being able to step back from your song and being open to like productive revisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helps when you have like multiple people giving you input. Like, if you keep something just to yourself, you're never gonna it's never gonna grow. But if you have someone listen to it and then you see their reaction and then they're like, oh, it could be like this though. It would be better. Like, you kind of tweak it to elicit the reaction that you want. So yeah, I mean, I think sharing your music with close people that you trust, and then just being open to like trust that the song at the basis is a good song. Like, production and songwriting, right, are two separate things. So as long as the song is good, you could do any production to it and it'll hold if the song is good.
I like the way you put that, like, as production and songwriting being separate, because I think a lot of people don't make that distinction and they just start an idea and they just layer and layer and layer, and that's their production and writing process. And like, when you do that, I think it's so easy to just get overwhelmed by option paralysis, or be like, this is the song, that's just what it is, right? But when you do think about it as being two separate parts, it does actually open the door a lot more to being flexible with the arrangements and everything else that can come into it.
I mean, like, if you think about like whatever song you think is great, like if you can imagine that being played on acoustic guitar and just vocals, or just piano and vocals, and it still holds up as like a really good song, you're like, oh, this is a great song. This works. It doesn't need all the bells and whistles to like prop it up. Like, even like good rock songs, like I'm sure I've heard, piano arrangements of that, and you're like, wow, that sounds amazing, because it's a good song, it's a good melody, and like it doesn't need doubled guitars, it doesn't need a big bombastic beat, it just needs to beat.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't remember where I heard it or if this is even true, but someone once told me that like Bob Rock would say to Metallica, like, these songs have to sound good on an acoustic guitar, and if they sound heavy on an acoustic, then they're going to sound massive when we add everything else, right? It's like,
I mean, that's 100% true.
Yeah, the foundation of it has to just be a good song and just have the feel and the vibe, and then from there you just expand and build it and add more of that emotion into it with like different layers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that like production doesn't influence songwriting, because sometimes it does. Like you do like a drum beat and it like influences the way you think about lyrics or melody. You know, they do go hand in hand, but they also should be separate. It's like a weird catch-22.
Yeah. But also, I mean, you just mentioned like they should be separate. And on that note, I'm curious to like dig into like the workflow element, the workflow side of things again. Like, you know, personally, like I kind of feel like writing, recording, editing, mixing, like those are very different segments in my mind. Like I think that you tend to work more efficiently when you can actually compartmentalize each of those things. But a lot of people don't work that way. Like so with you, like what's your preferred way of working? Do you like to mix as you're recording? Like or are you editing as you're tracking things? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, since I've been so ingratiated with the pop world in the past like 4 years or however long, all of that is combined in one day for me, right? So as we're tracking, I'm editing drums, I'm editing guitars, I'm editing bass as someone is like singing or putting down a key part. So then as we're listening back, we're like slowly building the piece and I'm balancing levels. I'm adding like in the box plug-in compressors and EQs and stuff and mixing it as we go. Because then not only does like everyone in the room get excited about the song as we go along, but then at the end of the night, my night gets a lot shorter. So I'm not there hours on end, then editing, then mixing when I'm like already burnt out. So I think doing all that simultaneously 100% helps everyone involved, and especially you as the engineer. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of editing as you track if you're like comfortable doing that. Like I will time up drums, bass, guitars as I'm doing the next part and like bounce back between everything. And even like editing vocals, like I like to manually de-ess and take out breaths like with clip gain and stuff. So I'll do that as like they're doing more vocal passes on the lead vocal pass. I'll take out all the S's and make it, because then you could add EQ to boost some of the top end without getting that S's and in their ears and stuff, and compress it a little bit better so it sits better. So all that stuff just happening simultaneously helps the process. And it also, I think, helped me become a better engineer, because it's like, A, you're being fast, and then B, you're making decisions in like real time, as opposed to like sitting there and you're like, oh, tweak, tweak, tweak. 2 hours later, you're still tweaking the same thing, you know?
Yeah, and hoping that the band likes it or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That the artist likes it. Yeah. No, I can see that. I also think that there's an element to it too, going back to that confidence part, where it's like, you have to be confident in your ability to do that quickly as well, because you don't want to be the person that holds up a session because you want to just edit a vocal now that somebody recorded it, you know?
Right. No.
So
yeah,
the speed in the workflow has to be there in order to be efficient with this and make it kind of work as one big unit.
When I started engineering, I had none of that skill, and that just kind of came as I went along, mostly because it was like kind of necessary to like evolve as an engineer and evolve in my career. So then, you know, it would just start with like, I was just like, okay, for this, we're just going to do a drum. Like I'll edit live drums into a drum loop and then go back and then count the real drums back in and then like put in fills and stuff. But then as time evolved, then it just got like, okay, I'm just going to edit all the drums as we go. And then, so yeah, that thing's evolves. So just start out slow and then you could get to that.
For sure. Well, another thing I was curious to ask about, and this kind of ties into what we're just talking about now, is engineering vocals. And you do a lot of that. And I'm curious to know, like, in your mind, what does great vocal engineering consist of?
Oh, that's a great question. I think
it's a loaded question, I know.
It depends. I think going back to the speed is super important, as like much of a bummer it is. Cause like in my mind, what I equate speed with like not artistry in engineering sense. Like when you do things fast, you just tend to like focus on that one thing. But with vocals, you want to keep the artist comfortable. You want to make sure that they're getting everything they need. And so being quick and like doing a take, then them listening back to the take, and then while they like sometimes they'll sing over it. So like you have to have another track ready for them to do like listen back, and then they'll do a melody and then be like, that's important. And then obviously like a clean vocal chain is super important, and making sure there's no issues with that. And also headphone mix, because if the headphones are bad, they're not going to sing well, and you're just going to hear them complain the whole time.
So as far as like a session setup and how you work efficiently within your session, like you mentioned playing back a track and having another one ready to go in case they're singing on top of it. Like, what does your session layout normally look like whenever you're working on vocals?
So I have 2 record vocal tracks with like low latency plugins that just go out like my mix bus or my stereo out. And then I have about like 8 lead vocal tracks with kind of the same processing that then go into a lead vocal bus, which is kind of like, this is sort of going into the end goal. And then that lead vocal bus then goes into like an all vocal buses. And then there's some, reverb sends, delay sends. And then I have like 2 sets of 24 background vocal tracks. And so these are not recorded onto. So what I do is I record on the record track, then Control Option, drag down. It's hard to, I don't know if you ever get this, like Pro Tools key commands are hard for me to vocalize because I just do them.
Oh yeah.
And then people are like, what is that key command? I'm like, I have no idea. I just do it.
Yeah. I'm the same way, or there's just so many of them that I've kind of lost track of them. Now I just have a stream deck and I just know which button to press, right?
So like, so we'll do a take, record, and then if they like it, immediately I'll drag it down to one of the vocal tracks that feed in the lead vocal bus, go back to the start, hit record again. Even if they just want to listen back, just always in record, or in like quick punch. That way you could just quickly do it and drag it out and just keep it going like that. Because many times like people are like, okay, that's good, move on. And then punches kind of the same way. And then you do stacks. So and I know like having a huge template, some people like hate, but my template is like at least 200 tracks annoyingly. But I know where everything is and I know how all it functions, and it's purposeful. But yeah, record, drag down, re-record, mute as you go along if they don't want to hear it, like clip mute or track mute. Yeah, and just keep going for as long as it takes. And that's where the speed kind of gets into it, because the quicker you could do that, the more confident they feel, the better the flow is.
For sure. I love that. That's definitely an approach that I've taken on a lot more with like, any sort of pop or like hip hop vocal or something like that. It's just like that having that live record track and just dragging it down to like other takes and performances, like it's such a fast way of working. And it's always amazing when like someone, you hit stop after like the person's listening to the track and they recorded something and they're like, let's record that. And you're like, oh, I got it. It's a good feeling to know, like, I saved you. You got it. Yeah. It's perfect. Let's move on. Yeah. Right.
Or the worst case scenario is like, someone's like, oh man, that was so good, but I can't remember. It's like, don't worry, I got you. Here's what it is. And then, but yeah, that always be recording. There was when I was working at Henson Studios, one of the like engineers that used to come in all the time was like, always just be recording. Even if someone's just out in the live room, just sitting at the piano, not really doing anything, just record them. They're in a recording studio. It's silly not to record someone doing anything, because you never know. They'll be like, come in and be like, oh man, I just had this great idea, but I totally forgot what it was. And then you'll be like, oh, I got you. So whether it be like just ambient room mics, another thing to like circle back, like I'll always have, especially for writing session, room mics in record. And the room mics are just stuff that people aren't using. So like while they're writing, the main vocal mic is not used. So I'll just set that up in the middle of the room, pop it on Omni and hit record, mute it so I don't have to listen to it. But then it's just capturing everything that happened. So if someone's like singing in the bathroom, an idea, I'm like, okay, let me just game this up and we could figure this out, So yeah, always being prepared, always, just anticipating what anyone needs.
I love that, man. What would you say is the difference between like a good quality vocal recording versus like nailing like the right performance?
I think performance beats quality. Well, I mean, that's not 100% true, because obviously if it's a really bad quality performance, like quality recording, it's not good. But I think performance is pretty important. Like you could have a really good, well-recorded vocal, but if the artist isn't performing to their best or it doesn't sound as good, like you feel that. And even more so if it's well recorded. So I would like, always go for performance over quality.
For sure. And the performance side of it, it's like, we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier too. It's like, it's the mood sometimes, like the vibe of the studio or whatever. Like there's so many different factors that can impact that performance. So how much of great vocal engineering is technical versus like psychological?
I think it's definitely maybe 50-50. Well, because technically, like you just have a good chain. You just know when to gain down, gain up, which you learn by going over the song. And then obviously there's just like, whether you're in Pro Tools, Logic, or Ableton, there's just like workflow technicality, which you should now get used to. But then also, this goes back to the whole confidence thing. If you're calm and collected while doing a vocal like engineering, then people also feel calm and collected. And generally with vocal stuff, it's just like, max 3 people in the room, you, a producer maybe, and the artist, or it's just you and the artist. So psychological, definitely. Because if you're like flustered and be like, okay, hold on, give me a second, just wait, then they're going to get either annoyed or just like over it. They'll be like, well, this sucks.
For sure. So like the other part of like the psychological side of it too is the like coaching side of engineering and producing a vocal as well, right? Like sometimes people, they're in their heads about their own vocal and you got to give them some direction. How involved are you in like that side of things? Or do you often just leave that up to like a producer in the room?
Like a little bit of both. If they're like, I'm like, oh, we should go again. If I think we need more, or like if I think there should be more takes. But as far as like performance and stuff, like my thing is if someone asks me, I'll answer. Like if someone's like, how was that? Was that good? Do you think I could do it better? Then I'll be like, yeah, if you're asking me, I'll be honest. But I'm not going to be like, especially like with a high caliber artist, I'm not going to be like, you could do that better. Because that just like, that's not, I don't know if it's not my place, but I just like would feel awkward. Like personally to say that to anyone in any regard, you could do that better. Unless they like explicitly told me, hey, just let me know if this sucks.
Fair. And I imagine too, it's like, it's a relationship thing at that point too. Like if you know the person well enough, then like you have that comfort level as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a few artists that are like high caliber that I work with that I could be like, nah, just like do one more, just a little clearer or something. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's fair. Because then at that point, the trust is like built. And so they're like, well, if he's saying that, I know in the end, it's going to be really good. So it's worth doing it again. As opposed to someone who's going to take that person and be like, oh, you don't think I'm good at what I do? For
sure. Yeah, I think it's like definitely know your role in the studio to begin with, and like whose decisions are the ultimate decision. Who is the ultimate decision maker? But also like having relationships with people. I mean, there's some degree of like understanding the talent of a singer as well, and knowing like what they can and can't get away with. Like I'm sure if you're working with like an Adele or something like that, and she was just singing all monotone, you're like, I've heard you do better,
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But even then, like there could be lots of different reasons for why they're choosing to go that route. So like you have to tread carefully with it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it goes with any, like even like a drummer or something. Like you could, or a guitarist, like it's all the same. It's just that the vocalist can easily just vocalize how they're feeling, and they're usually the main thing about things. But even with like a guitarist or a bass player, like you'd be like, oh, you could get that tighter. Because at the end of the day, like yes, we can edit everything, but if the performance is tight from the like start, then it's just ultimately going to sound better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you talked about speed earlier and how you build that into your sessions and how you try to be really prepared. As far as like mic chains and stuff like that go, how do you prepare for an artist to come in? Like, do you have your normal go-to mic chains? Do you do shootouts very early on? Like, what does that part look like?
Well, it depends on like where we're recording, but usually, so the 96 in and out stuff is set up at Kid Harpoon's studio, which we built out of just like a rental house. So it's a big home studio, like probably one of the biggest. You could think like the whole home is a studio. So that's all set and goes to, so that's like vetted and things. But when we go to other recording studios, yeah, I'll just look at the mic list and I'll be like, okay, this is what we got. And then all the gear list and be like, this is what we got. And then, yeah, I have like a few like standard stuff. Like for kicks, I'll like kick in, like I always use a D12 VR. I love that mic. And then that'll go through like if there's a Neve available, a Neve, and then do an LA2A and then into tools. And like same with like kick out at 47. So I have standard stuff, and then like that I know will work. And then I have like fun stuff that I'll add in to like spice things up. But like, yeah, there's standard things that I always will do.
It's like your baseline to get started, and then if something sounds weird, you swap it out.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, I know a drum kit's going to sound good like this, with like these close mics. The only like different things that I concern myself when going from different studios to studios is the room sound, because those are the things that change, right? Like the physicality of the room, how to capture that room. As far as like close mics go, like that's pretty much always the same unless they don't have something.
Do you take the same approach with vocals as well? Like I know some people prefer certain styles of microphones, or like what does that look like there?
No, with vocals, I was same chain, U47 into a 1073 or a 1073 clone, like a BAE, into an LA2A and straight into Pro Tools. That never changes. Sometimes like an M49, or if it's like a rock song, like an RE20 or an SM7 without the wind sock, but generally a U47 for some reason. To my ears, that just sounds the best. And like, yeah, some people sound better on a 67, but to me, 67 sound like a little more airy and tinny compared to a 47 with vocals. But I guess if you have like a low voice, the 67 balances it out. But I've never experienced anyone with a low voice that like needs a 67 that a U47 can't capture.
It's certainly good to have your like go-to chain. What would make you want to switch out a microphone? Like what kind of things do you normally hear that indicate like I think there's a better mic for this kind of thing?
I think performance, like you could hear, like if it if it just doesn't sound correct. I don't know how to like explain that. Like you'll know when it doesn't sound right, but like that's not working. That's not right. And then I would switch it out. Be like, because it's not going to be the it's not going to be the compressor. It is going to be the mic. And you're like, okay, well, something about this situation is not quite working sonically. So let's switch it up. And then like you could go the opposite direction. So if like the 47's not working, just go with a handheld dynamic mic, like an RE20 or something, or even a 58. You're like, okay. And then go in between or go to a 414 or something.
For sure. Yeah. And I think there's having the luxury of having a 47 is definitely a nice thing to have for sure. But I mean, you did also mention like SM7s and stuff like that. Like those are more affordable options that also work really great too. But I think it is just a matter of like finding a mic that you know really well and that like you understand what the response should be like from that mic, and then you can make the decisions from there of like this doesn't sound right with this.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on like what a lot of people are comfortable with, because a lot of people are comfortable with holding an SM7 and just singing into it like this, right? As opposed to like having a pop filter and having a mic in front of them. The like casualness of just a handheld dynamic mic yields sometimes a better performance. And it's not a bad sounding mic. You know, a lot of records are made with the SM7. They sound great. Michael Jackson used one. Like it all like things happen. It sounds great. So at the end of the day, like we were talking about quality over performance, I think performance in that case, you know. Not that the SM7 is not quality.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, it also goes back to what you said at the beginning too, of like nothing matters, you know, like the mic choice really doesn't. Like, yeah, it has an impact on the sound, but like as long as it's getting the right performance and if it sounds good and like there's nothing distracting about it, then it's probably good to move on.
There's been so many, this is a little like off topic, but there's been so many times where I've seen like a producer or someone else in the room like look at a meter on a compressor, be like, whoa, that is crushing. Like I'm a big proponent of compression on the way in. And so I will like slam things. And then some people like see it and they're like, whoa, that's insane. I was like, yeah, but you didn't notice it until like you looked at it. You were enjoying everything. It sounded great up until like you made a visual connection. And like with albums and music and stuff, no one is seeing you record it. They're just listening to it, right? So if it's an SM7 or a U47, whatever yields sounds the best to you, it doesn't matter. No one's going to judge you.
For sure. And if they only knew how much compression usually happens in the mixing stages to get that like flatlined vocal, you know?
Exactly. Like it's going to get compressed later.
Yeah. Well, speaking of compression, like you mentioned that you like to track with compression on the way in. Like what does a typical compression chain look like for you? Like you said you're often hitting it a little harder. Like how much is hard to you?
It depends on the instrument. Like for drums and stuff, like at least like 6 dB, like on in, kick out on snares. If I have the luxury of getting 1178 and like stereo linking the two, then it'll be like, yeah, 6 or 7. Like again, I don't rarely look at meters anymore. Like I make it a point not to. Like I'll dial it in, and if it sounds good, it sounds great. Yeah, even for vocals, like I will, like it'll be 6 dB reduction on LA2A. And like, because if they're dynamic, they're going to do that. And then if it sounds bad, you could hear that and you're like, oh, well, that's too much. Back it off. But yeah, I go for that whole adage about like, use your ears, not your eyes thing. And so if it sounds good, it's good.
I guess it's also a matter too of knowing where it's going to end up after you have your hands on it, like who's going to be mixing it, and like if you can prepare the tracks in a better way so that they have less to do later on, then why not?
The goal is always at every single step of the process, even the songwriting process, is to make the best version of what you have possible, right? So like there's no point in saying this whole thing about like, oh, let's fix it in the mix thing is so silly to me. Like just get what you want right now. Let's do it. Let's make this your vision. Don't like kick it down the line and then be like, oh, well, I wish we had more time to experiment with this. Like just try to make it as finished as possible. Like at the end of the day, like for those writing sessions or like album sessions, like I will have tracked, mixed, and like faux mastered. Like it should, like theoretically, like you could put it out and it's ready. Like everything should be good.
Of course. Yeah, it makes sense. Like it just, especially if you're working with the producer or the artist in the room, like they're going to have their vision for where it's going too. So if you can make it better, then lean into it for sure.
There's no like, because I find that like when you don't do the compression on the way in and you like hide and you like trim like, okay, this is just recording, right? Then for me, it just doesn't sound as good. And then like I would personally probably get like very unconfident and nervous about just having that. I'd be like, don't worry. Like the last thing I want to say is, don't worry, it will sound better. Like I want it to sound good right now.
Yeah, don't leave any possibility of doubt.
Yeah, you hired me to make it sound good. I'm not going to say, don't worry, it's going to sound better.
Yeah. I'm just doing a half-assed job right now, but it'll sound better later,
Yeah. Like once you leave tonight, I'll like go through it. Like to me, that's the worst thing I could ever say to someone.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, we've talked a lot about vocals, but another instrument that I'm curious to ask about is bass. And one record in particular that you worked on that I think sounds incredible, and where bass is like a really big role, is the Kings of Leon record that you worked on. Can we please have
Jared.
fun?
He's a good bass
player. And in my
so.
mind, like the thing with that band is like it is about the bass to me. Like that is like the most important element in their tracks. Like it's a driving force. It's like it always has something interesting that keeps you in, keeps it grounded. So I'm curious to know about like your process for recording bass and what that normally involves.
So for Jared, we did 2 amps. One amp had a FET 47, one amp had a RE20. I think it was a B15 flip top, had the FET 47, and then there was an Ampeg. Sorry, it was quite a while ago now. I'm trying to remember. That had the RE20. So we split the signal, did it like that. And then we also took a DI, pre and post any of his pedals. So we're talking about 4 tracks of bass. But yeah, it was just getting the good, and like, Kings, they have such good techs and such good crew. So like I was being helped every single part of the way. So like they would play the techs and we would dial on the bass sound, and then they would dial on the good amp sound. And so it's like a collaboration. And then I think it was for that we were in Nashville. So through Blackbird, I rented a Fairchild 660. So I used that on the FET 47, the mono one, because I don't think they had, the 670 wasn't available or something. Otherwise I would have done 2. And then an LA2A and whatever other mic that wasn't going through the Fairchild. But yeah, that was that.
So is that like a normal chain for you, where you'll split like pre and post effects and have DIs for that, and then
yes, if it's like a band situation, yeah, just to have the flexibility. And the multiple amps only really came from them because he wanted to use it was kind of a little bit, now that I remember, it was a little, because the B15 was good, but it didn't have the bite. So what we did was add a little more distortion into the Ampeg. So then it would have the top end, whereas the like low end and the warmth would come through the B15. So it was the combination that kind of made that. But normally, not a lot of bands have the option of doing 2 amps, or it depends on size and budget. But I will generally always go with tubes for amps over non-tubes for bass especially.
Nice. So what role do you see each element of that chain playing in the final sound?
Well, I feel like the amp is really the most important part because, that is the sound. That is the sound. And then obviously the mics capturing it is a thing. The RE20, now that I think, but the RE20 was probably the distorted one just because it could take a higher SPL. And then the FET 47 was on the V15 because it could just capture the breadth of the warmth. And, it has a minus, you could go minus 16 with the pad. So it could handle stuff too. And then the Fairchild was there just to like color it. I don't know. In my mind, tubes are so like nice, warm and fuzzy. And then when you think about bass, you want it to also be warm and fuzzy, like a nice little blanket. And then the Ampeg just are a little fuzz on the top. I think they're all important. And then the pre and the post DI really don't get used unless you just want to blend in a little more attack with the pre DI, or B, also a little more attack with the post DI, and you could go either or on that. But it's mostly about the amps.
So is the DI, is that something that you're using more from like an editing perspective than like in the final sounds?
It's more of a safety net, just in case like Jared's not happy with the pedals that he used or the end chain. Then we could reamp his performance. We could redo his pedals, or with the post DI, we could just reamp. With the pre DI, we could redo pedals and reamp. It's just flexibility. And if you have the ins and outs and you can afford to do that, you should definitely do that for like guitars, bass, anything that you might go back and be like, I just like put a little too much fuzz on that. I wish I could just take it back. Because you can't really do that in the box. You can't do that with EQ. Like, then you're changing the sound in a big way. So yeah, those are just like for safety nets.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that the DIs are like crucial if you're doing guitars or bass for for editing. It's like, especially anything heavier, it's like you're going to just be looking at a sausage of a waveform. So like might as well have that DI where you can actually see the detail and work off of that instead, right?
Big fan of tab to trans, and those things are necessary for that.
Fair. As far as like setting up bass tones go, is that something that you typically leave more to the artist, or is that something you'll find yourself getting more involved in as well?
No, it's definitely, all of the sounds are definitely always collaborative, right? So it's like, I'll always set up, like we talked about, like a bass line. Like, these are the mics I have. This is what we want, or what I want. This is what I would use. And then obviously they'll play, whether it be drums or bass or guitar. I'm like, oh, it's lacking this, or I want it to be more that. And then, first I'll start with the EQ, grab that. That's not doing it for them. Then we'll go to the mic change, like an actual sonic change. And then, and like I said, with the Kings, they had such a good tech crew and like all their staff. So they would be like tweaking sounds, and they know what the guys like. And so the bridge between all that just like made it super easy and super seamless to be like, oh no, I know what he means when he says that, and dial up the amp, the treble or the bass, or something. For sure.
You talked about like tubes being a big part of your sound when it comes to the bass, and how you like to use like tube compression and stuff like that as well. I mean, there's tubes definitely add a lot of warmth to a mix, but they can also sometimes add a little bit of muddiness as well. So like what are you paying attention to during that tracking process to make sure that muddiness isn't happening and you're not fighting things like the kick drum and that kind of stuff?
Well, EQ, again, like whether it be pre-tape or post-tape, like I'll usually have like a FabFilter Pro Q3, was at the time, now Q4, on like every track, because it doesn't introduce any latency and it's so easy just to cut frequencies. And like as a general rule, I'll probably always end up cutting like 300 hertz on bass stuff, and any vocals, any guitars like a little bit less. But that's where I find, and I think a lot of people always say the muddiness comes from, is that kind of low mid area. And then that's also where that kick thump kind of lives, right? At like 250. So that clears out some of the way for that to do it. But yeah, just EQ really, and just like being mindful of it. Again, like if you could hear that and you could be like, oh, well, this is conflicting with this. Yeah.
For sure. And then as far as compression settings go, you talked about how you like to hit things a little harder. Like, do you do the same thing with bass?
Oh, yeah, 100%. In my mind, like, with bass more so, because depending on the style and depending on the player, like their attacks will be very attacky, and then sometimes with the bass, the waveform will go like this, and it's like, oh, you just get the attack, and I kind of want to round that out and just like either A, bring up the part that goes down, or B, just cap the first part. So it's more like just constant dun dun, like what you.
Yeah, you're just getting that solid low end, like it's just like very consistent. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate the power of like compression on bass. Like it's so important to hit things hard and just get it locked in. Do you find yourself ever like splitting frequencies at all?
Like multi-band compression and stuff, you mean, or?
Yeah, I know some people will like basically maybe they'll record it. Maybe this is more from a mixing perspective, but like they'll take a DI track or an amp track and then like duplicate it, filter out the low end from the top end, and have like kind of separate controls, and then process those channels differently. Do you ever mess around with that?
No, not really. I mean, yes and no. Like if there's like I think we did that at the amp stage would be the thing. Like we focused on that one amp being the distorted high end one and the other amp being the low end one. So yes and no, we did that while we were recording, as opposed to splitting one track into two tracks.
Makes sense. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But generally for bass, like if it's just a DI track, I'll just like add the saturation and use multi-band compression on the one track to get the both. Because, with the Fab Filter, I love Fab Filter, if you couldn't tell. With the Fab Filter MB, like you could, gain up any band, and that's like EQing, like compress it and tighten it. And then I find out that also helps with like controlling the low end of bass. Like if you just put that last like shelf compression on it, that's like from 250 down or even 65 down, like super low, and just like compress that and put the knee up so it's always kind of working. It just like makes everything just sit, especially for bass.
Love that. That's awesome, man. Dude, this has been really interesting to like hear your stories and your process with this, and I love learning more about it. And I can tell like you care about what you're doing, and you're just like you're working hard at making the sounds sound incredible, which is awesome. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. One last question. At the end of the day, what ultimately makes a great sounding mix in your mind?
Oh, that's a good question. If it feels good, the feeling. Like it has to make you feel something, right? Like I'm sure so many people have said this, or you've heard this, like where it's like, oh, well, it technically is good. I don't like that word technically in a mix doesn't really translate for me. Like I think it goes back to the whole thing about like anything, like you could do anything as long as it sounds good, it sounds good. And I think that comes from like feeling and understanding the song, and like it doesn't have to be like a perfect mix. Like a lot of like punk songs and stuff, right? Like even way back in the day, like those mixes aren't great, but they make you feel something and it sounds good, like, and you still listen to it. But it's not like technically a great mix, or it's technically not a good recording. So I think, yeah, it's just how it feels. And even like, if you look back at like, I'm a big fan of like oldies music, like doo-wop and like 60s, like Sam Cooke stuff. And none of that stuff, like some of the mixes on that are insane, like technically insane. But I loved that music. And if it was any other way, it wouldn't be the same.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. It's funny because like we're engineers and we're talking about like engineering and getting things sounding really good and like attention to detail and all that, but none of it really matters, I guess.
I know. If there's one thing to take away from this is nothing matters. No. Well, yeah, no. Things do matter, and it matters because like you want the flexibility, and it should sound, because I feel like you gotta know what you're doing in order to intentionally not know what you're doing. That doesn't make any sense, but yeah.
No, but you have to know what you're doing in order to shape the sound the way you want it to be. And then if there's imperfection in that process, but it creates the emotion, it creates the feeling, then I think mission accomplished at that point.
Yeah, you just want to capture the energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dude, this has been great. I really enjoy this. If people want to learn more about you or like follow you online, maybe even work with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
Just Instagram. I keep a low profile. Yeah, just DM on Instagram. It's at brian.raj on Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome, easy. Man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So that was my interview with Brian Rajaratnam, and I really enjoyed learning more about his process, and in particular, his focus on speed and efficiency. Like, I love the way he sets up his sessions to work fast, and even, just like his studio and all of that. you could tell that he's someone who just cares about doing the best job he can and making sure that he's not the bottleneck for everyone else in the room, right? And I think that's a really important thing, whether you're working with other producers and other engineers or whatever, or if you're just recording local bands, like you still have to be very, very efficient. You don't want people to feel like you're the bottleneck, you're dragging down the energy of the session. All of that goes a really long way. And, especially we were talking a lot about vocals and the psychology of vocals. So much of that psychological drain happens when things get slowed down in a session and when someone's trying to figure out a problem or set up mics and all this and that. Like that stuff will kill a session. And at that high level that he's working at, when you're working with people like Miley Cyrus, like you have to be very efficient. Like they've seen the best of the best. So you have to like work at that level. You have to come in prepared and just absolutely crush it. So yeah, I thought it was great to learn more about his process there. I also really liked learning about how he maps out his sessions for vocals. In many ways, he actually kind of works in a similar fashion to how I do with my sessions, where I typically have a couple record tracks and then I just have take tracks, where every performance goes into, so we can work really fast. We're not having to like listen back and kill the mood while we're just like critiquing and editing things on the fly. Like, no, we just move it fast. And yeah, it sounds like very similar to what Brian's doing there. And that's something I actually learned a lot from working in voiceover work. Like early in the episode, we talked about having diversity in your skills. Like for me, I learned a lot of my vocal engineering processes from working in the film world and doing a lot of voiceover and ADR work where like, again, it has to be very fast. People are in the union. So like there's union fees and, time is money there. So you have to just work really fast. And I would encourage you to like think about how you track your sessions as well. And what can you do to be more efficient there? Whether it's setting up your gear a certain way so that you can just turn a mic on and you're live and ready to go. Or maybe it is your track layout. All that stuff makes a really big part in how smooth your sessions go. So definitely set yourself up for success as best as you can there. I also thought it was cool to talk about that idea of confidence in the studio too. And how to work fast, you have to have confidence. But confidence isn't something that you just innately have. You have to develop it. You have to gain that. And a lot of it just comes from some trial and error. And we cover that in this episode here too. But I thought Brian also brought up a really great point, which is like, have someone that you can bounce ideas off of as well when it comes to like revisions and or your skills, and just, having someone that you can say, hey, what do you think of this? Who you can trust that they're going to give you valuable, actionable information and not just blow smoke up your ass, right? Like, someone who's going to say like, this could be better, or I like when you did this, but maybe not that. Like having someone who you can trust in your corner is so key. And I know that that's something a lot of people don't have. A lot of people are just working in isolation in their basements. They don't have an engineer who they trust to give them the right direction. So that's something that I actually help people with inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And it's one of the reasons why I built that program was because I know there's a lot of people that are feeling stuck and they're second guessing themselves constantly. Maybe they don't have the confidence in their process. Maybe they don't even know the process or what to be listening for, how to use the tools. And so that's really why I built Amplitude. And in that program, I work one-on-one with my students to help make sure that the vision that they have for their music comes to life. And we walk through a beginning to end process from recording, editing, and mixing, having the vision for your music so that before you even start that, like you know what to be executing on, how to get the most out of your gear, how to set up your studio for success, trust your monitors, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm working one-on-one with them, even hopping in mixes together, and we're working on mixes live on calls. So if that sounds like something you'd find helpful and you want someone in your corner, I would love to help you. So make sure to check out masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, there's a link where you can book a call with me. I'd love to hop on a call to learn more about what you're working on, what your goals are, what your processes look like, and to see if I can identify ways that I can help you. And if I can help you, then we can talk about the program, what it would look like to work with each other. If not, no worries. I only work with people who I truly believe I can help. So if you're interested in learning more about getting help with your mixes, once again, masteryourmix.com/amplitude, and that's where you can find all the details there. With that said, we're at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Have a good one. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.